We'll start. Okay, we are live. It's Wednesday, April 9th, and tax week is the taxes are due next week on Tuesday, I believe. And I understand that the tariffs have been suspended and all kinds of interesting things going on. I understand that the hoodies are getting pounded and the stock market is up. Boy, what a day! What a day!
And I spoke to the Secretary of Treasury. Been texting back and
Lots
forth with
going
him.
on. So before we get going here, let's have our own John Sibley Butler play some music.
Falling in love again. Never thought I would again. Never thought I would. And I may be making mistakes again. If I lose or win, how would I know?
All right. Thank you, Johnny.
You're welcome, sir. How are you doing today?
Oh, it's always a pleasure. It's always a pleasure. I am looking at the power grid, and I'm looking at things are pretty cool. It's a very normal day in Austin. It's a perfect temperature, San Diego weather, 82 degrees. And what's the weather like in Georgia, Llewellyn? You're in Georgia.
Oh, the weather in Georgia is utterly beautiful. This is down in southern Georgia on the border with Florida, very near Tallahassee, in the so-called Red Hills of Georgia. And there are a lot of old hunting estates, and this one is an especially beautiful one. I'm looking out a glorious window here at one of the prettiest lawn and trees that I can imagine. Just lovely beyond words. I'll come.
Oh wow, look at that. Beautiful. That's southern states.
You know, these northerners are always coming down and taking pictures of putting them back in the snow. and let autumn happen just two weeks a year, and then it freezes like.
Well, I noticed that where I live in Rhode Island, the temperature is 42 today. Up here, it's around 6.
Well, Llewellyn, would you like to go to the Masters tournament? You're real close, you know.
No, the Masters.
I don't wish to see people chasing balls into holes.
My bourgeois sport, you really hurt me.
Llewellyn, give us your analysis. What's going on in the world? What's happening?
Well, I think we're in the middle of what might be called the Second American Revolution. And like all revolutions, it's messy, untidy, and incomplete. And we don't know where it will come out and who the winners and losers will be. Certainly, the Trump administration has begun with more fire and brimstone and fury than we've ever seen an administration take office. Some of it legal, much of it contested in court, with enormous financial implications for the whole world and for our relationship with the world. You know, I did a television program which aired last weekend with a colleague in Canada, and he was able to express in a way I have not heard from anyone else the extraordinary anger of the Canadians at some of Trump's activities, partly the tariffs, but also saying that Canada should be a 51st state. There's a lot of uncertainty out in the world. I'm a member of the Association of European Journalists and have a pretty active correspondence with those. And they're very upset. They're very distressed. They relied on America as being solid, permanent there. America always had their backs, and they don't feel America has their backs anymore. So it's a very disturbed situation globally. Nobody knows the economic impact, to what extent Some countries will be totally crushed by tariffs, others less so. They're still recovering from the huge blow that they suffered with the disappearance of the USAID, so important to some really marginal countries, especially in Africa. So it's a new time, and you don't turn the clock back on this in a hurry.
Okay, well, Johnny, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think it's, as Llewellyn was said, it is a new time, but it's a new time a lot in America, but this is a different kind of new time. That is to look at how the process was done and the way the formulas were done and how it was really, put on the American people is unprecedented, I think. But I think what we do is to look at how things would come out and how things would change. But on the other hand, there's lots of opportunities. I'm working with entrepreneurs, I'm working with cities. As a matter of fact, I think Nashville wants to come and visit Austin in the future. And Kevin, I might have them drop by your shop, who knows, and let you talk to them about what we've done, in Austin to make it as we call it, George Kosmeskis, Technopolis. So I've been involved in that, writing most of the books and most of the articles of what we did. And but this is what's interesting. If you look at what I would call the soul of America, I've always felt that entrepreneurs determine the economy and not politicians. I've taught for 40 years plus when I do my work on my articles on entrepreneurship, or what I call the sociology of entrepreneurship, because it gets involved with immigration and et cetera. You find that it's the entrepreneurs who moved around the globe. I mean, even 2000 BC, I have a work on 2000 BC, and then where they had Silicon Valleys in the ancient world. And I'm really, really, it's interesting to me that nobody's talked about the importance of business enterprise. It is not the government, it is the businesses that make America great. Right. So what I could do, I mean, in Texas, I guess our legislature meets twice every 2 years, and everything is shut down. And actually, the entrepreneurs run the state of Texas. So I'm surprised that nobody talked about that. If you look at the stock market, I think my interpretation has always been that Peter Navarro, who's an economist from California, was always sort of he was writing anti-quote China books, 10, 15 years ago. And so I think this is his program. But let us do this. Let's let this experiment run out, because it will run out, and let us see what happens. Because remember, we have two economies. We have the real economy of goods and services, and then we have the money economy of the stock market, and the two really never meet. I mean, if the stock market falls, the question is, what's the relationship between the real economy and the shadow economy, as Schumpeter would call it? So we have two economies, and what's real bad about all of this is this: we have no such thing that's made in America. We have no cars that's made in America. The windshield wipers might come from Canada. The brakes might come from England. The tires might come from Mexico. The computer system might come from where. So there's nothing really that's quote made in America. It's say, well, Dr. Butler, where'd you go to graduate school? I said, went to Northwestern, but everything that I read were Germans. Schumpeter, Durkheim, Weber, because Germany had some of the best scholars in the world. So, all of the scholars in America were made by scholars from all around the world. Well, it's the same kind of situation that you have here. So I think that's another thing. But otherwise, I think the stock market is coming back. But remember, it's the will of the people that you can't break. You cannot break the will of the people. And if Americans decide, if the government decides to compete on production, what we have to do with all of the tariffs that the government is doing, just go to Detroit and build a factory. Come to Austin, Texas, and let the government build a factory. Because in China, they don't have to do what we do with private enterprise. I mean, the government would say, we're going to build a chapter, a production force right here, and they build it. I was a professor at the University of Beijing when China was thinking about the entrepreneurship, and I have lots of ex-students who are MBA students who are CEOs now of companies in China. But they didn't have to do what we did, right? They didn't So why not just take the billions or the trillions that the government is going to get from the tariffs? Because remember, there's no such thing as taxing private enterprise or taxing corporate firms. They just pass it on to me and you as a consumer, right? It's a tax. And of course, these tariffs are taxes. You just take the billions of dollars or the trillions of dollars. If you want to compete with China, let's go build some factories. Let's build factories and do that. So it's interesting. I kind of finished up my CNBC disruptive technologies, and everything is going good.
Yeah. Well, I have a slightly different point of view. I think that you know, a lot of things are made in America. You know, according to the Department of Commerce Bureau of Economic Analysis, 52% of the goods consumed by Americans are made in America.
And I was speaking of automobiles. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we make automobiles in America, in
Jeeps.
Texas.
Jeeps. Hell, you need to go to the military. You want a Jeep? Who the hell want to drive a damn Jeep? Go get you one in the army.
But anyway, I think that my advice to the world order of the Western universe versus the Eastern universe is the U.S. and Europe should create a free zone, and American and European workers could come and go and get hired and moved between the two continents, and that would create a new world order. So anyway, with that said, I do concur with you that entrepreneurship is at the core of innovation, and we happen to have the right guest for that today. Kevin Koym is a ultra entrepreneur. He runs something called Tech Ranch, and Tech Ranch is really a organization that I've known since I moved here in 2000. Tech Ranch is now, per his own definition, a bridge builder, empowering entrepreneurs and ecosystems to scale internationally and drive innovation-led economic and social impact through strategic cross-border collaboration. I would say a lot of Mexico, a lot of Canada, a lot of other places, mentorship and practical execution frameworks. Tech Ranch helps us scale up and ecosystem leaders and turn their ideas into reality in a scalable and sustainable fashion. Kevin, welcome to the show. Tell us about you and Tech Ranch.
Thank you, Andres, and great to see you, Johnny. I would start with this. All the world's problems have already been solved. It's a matter of connecting the entrepreneur with a solution to the market with a problem. That fundamental thesis is what's been driving me over the last 20 years and building out Tech Ranch. It's carried me to 22 countries in the last 8 years, multiple sites in each one of those countries. And now the best example that you just referred to is between Texas and Mexico. In my career 32 years ago, my first customer for my first startup, and I was based in Austin, my first customer was a bank in Mexico. And we had an emerging technology that met this early adopting bank because they needed our system desperately. And it was because of that cross-border interaction that that bank actually made it through the peso crisis at the end of 1994 because of my software was was attributed part of that. And part of what that led me to believe was kind of like what both you guys are saying is access to markets. If we get entrepreneurs access to markets and get government out of the way, whether it's this government or that government or anyone else, there's fundamental things that we can solve as entrepreneurs that the governments are not able to address. Now that I'm not anti-government, I'm just saying there's like there's a way of really doing it, and very pro working with entrepreneurs across borders, because a lot of times people from other places in the world will find discoveries that we wouldn't have found here, right? That's the fundamental idea behind Tech Ranch and what's been driving my career all these years.
Yeah.
Well, Kevin, you remember, and I want to congratulate you for carrying on the tradition. When I was director of IC Square, the glory years, of course, the glory years, right? I had a program called Tech Bar.
Mhm.
and Tech Bob, President Fox from Mexico. And what we did, Andreas, was we bought technology company from Mexico to engage in our ecosystem. Because what we have in Austin is the ecosystem. And I'm going to ask you this, Kevin. And also, I taught in the MBA program at Monterrey Tech for 20 years for our MBA program. And I found working in Mexico was very, very interesting. And the reason why we bought Tech Bar, the Mexican companies, to Austin was because they did not have the kind of eco investment system that we have. So my first question is this. Do you see that Mexico has improved its ecosystem for entrepreneurs? Do they still have to leave the country to grow? Are you taking advantage of that? Because 1% of the wealth, I mean, the wealth in Mexico is here by 1% of the population, right? And so how do you see that in terms of working cross-border with companies and entrepreneurs?
I'm definitely bullish about Mexico.
Yeah.
Well, 1 week ago, I was in Monterrey, Mexico, and then a couple weeks, 3 weeks before that, I was in Chihuahua City
Mhm.
in Chihuahua, Mexico. Because of my career, like over the last 30 years of doing business in Mexico, I've always been really bullish about it. Now, obviously, every part of the world has difficulties and different types of difficulties. Andres and I were discussing some of them in Mexico before the show, and there are difficulties here. Like it's you can a lot of times people ask me about um, you know the cartels and stuff like that in Mexico. And yes, you got to be careful and make sure that you're not doing things that are untoward in that kind of. But I just remind people that you can go into a Walmart here in the United States and someone get shot up by an AR-15, and so there's the main thing about it is when I look at Mexico, are there issues? Yes. Are there opportunities? Yes. One of my favorite examples to kind of really frame this in is there's a technology out of Chihuahua, Mexico that I've gotten to work with over the last few years. A wife and husband team came up with a way of testing for heart attacks up to 8 hours before the big event. And the technology costs $2 per test, whereas the U.S. equivalent, if you want to kind of know what's going on with the person and what, especially before a heart attack, usually you're talking about putting $1,000 watch on the person, and this test in a totally different way. This couple came up with a whole different way of doing this. So when we look at that, the constraint, they say innovation is driven by constraints. The constraint that was happening in that part of Mexico enabled this engineer and his wife to actually be able to pull together a different solution than we would have seen in this market. And and it got started, got up to a certain stage, and then to the point you're making, John, about this idea to really go. Nowhere in the world has access to the capital markets like we do here in the United States. Period. End of story. There's no one else in the world. Europe doesn't have it. Any other part of the Americas. Japan doesn't have it. No other part of Asia really has it. You got to come to the States to go big. And so, I think that that's a natural thing. I think that's going to continue for some period of time. Even despite all the craziness about what's happening. The main thing is recognizing, and I think this is a big shift, and especially over the last couple of decades. It used to be that innovation only really happened in Silicon Valley, and then all of a sudden, those of us that grew up in Austin, you guys, and well, I mean, I'll say it, John, you and Andres included, right? The three of us have been here for 20 plus years.
40 plus.
Yeah,
Don't.
yeah. Well, yeah, in my case, I got here to go after an engineering degree in 86. And then my family's been in Williamson County since 1846. So we've been we've been around for a while. But
Well, let me ask you this, Kevin.
yeah,
One of my favorite economists is Hernando de Soto. Do you know his work?
I do.
And he wrote a great book entitled The Mystery of Capital: Why Capitalism Triumphs in the West and Fails Everywhere Else. And it's a great, great read. And of course, if you look at Silicon Valley, it was really created by Boston. So 128 what happened in the sequence in the mathematics is that 128 created it all, but in Boston you had to belong to the right clubs and in the right family. And so Stanford just said, come, we're going to create Silicon Valley. So they just went out there. So it was really Boston and New York, that really started all of this. But my question is, Hernando de Soto's thesis was that the ecosystem, that is just what, and even if you look at America, right, it's still 80% of all the venture capital, 70% is still in California. Right? If you come to Austin, Texas, right, then of the capital that's here, right, 80% of it is in Austin, right? I mean, it's not spread evenly across the world. So De Soto's idea was, how do we think about entrepreneurs? And I've always thought about entrepreneurs by starting with science, right? By science and technology. The telegraph is science. The combustion engine is science, right? The computer is science. Bill Gates went to Harvard, took the technology and just commercialized it. And I have a book on commercialization. So my question to you is still this: if we look at where you're working with entrepreneurs, whether it's in Austin or Mexico, how is the ecosystem? And I always ask my students, I say, all right, if you want to be a country western singer, you go to Nashville, right? You want to be an opera singer, you go to New York. Why? Because the ecosystem is already there. The drummers are there in Nashville and et cetera. You want to start an enterprise, you come to Austin, you go to Silicon Valley, you go to Boston. Why? Because people understand. They understand the connection between science and technology and business. So one of the tragedies of America, in my opinion, when I was in China, for example, 70% of the kids were majoring in the sciences. In America, they're majoring in business. So how do you see science and technology in Mexico evolving? Because science is everywhere. It's in the smallest universities. It's in the largest university. It's in NASA. It's in DOD. It's everywhere. So how do you connect that in your work, the science and technology, Mexico, America, the IP associated with working in Mexico, and whether or not the intellectual property is global or not? Thank you.
So in my case, the thing that I might start with is the thing I might start with is specifically talking about. So I just was in Monterrey, Mexico, about a week and a half ago, and part of what I saw there, I've been going to Monterrey since 1991. I worked, with Tec de Monterrey. The MIT of Mexico is based there. There's Mexico as a country is graduating about 160,000 engineers per year.
Mm-hmm.
They have it's an engineering culture that's akin to what we would see here in Austin or here in Texas. And then in some of the northern states in Mexico, one of the things I can tell you about is there is kind of that frontier culture, like frontier culture that some of the similar stories that you'd hear in Texas, you'll hear in Nuevo León, that state. In my case, because of the work that I do, one of the things that I did was building a skunkworks, a disruptive innovation vehicle for tying a technology in Mexico. And the skunkworks was built for GE. Now, I can't tell you exactly how the software was, what the software did, because they're still under NDA a few years later. But the key thing that happened is they had this one team in Monterrey, Mexico, that I've known of from a little bit more than a decade, had this big data technology. They were leaders in this big data technology. They're able to work with that technology in a way that they experimented because their costs are low. And we were, because of what they'd done, we were able to introduce them to GE and manage this, terabyte of data and do all sorts of information, find needles in this haystack over here. The thing that what I want to tie this back into is you talked about Hernando de Soto's book, The Mystery of Capital. In that book, one of the concepts that I took from the book is he says that life starts in small places. In biology, life doesn't start in big spaces. It's small, it starts in these small little areas, right? We see this on the shoreline. Life will start and grow in a small area that's protected, that then can kind of grow and then find its way to other places in the world. in my case as well, the thing that I think I benefited from is straight out of college, getting that engineering degree at UT. I got the chance of a lifetime. I worked for a Steve Jobs startup. I went from University of Texas at Austin to working for the Steve Jobs company called Next. And there's lots of things that I learned there. Almost 4 years of being there, being at a Steve Jobs organization. The crazy guy in the front of the room, beating his fist on the table, talking about vision. That was really valuable for me to have that experience. But the truth is, I missed the hippie musician culture of Austin, Texas.
Oh, oh.
Yeah, well, you know what I'm talking about.
I don't need to know all of it.
Yeah, we don't know what the thing about it is like, I wanted to help you, you want to help me. It's like one of the things that makes
right.
Austin unique and special and stuff like that. And so I came back from Silicon Valley to Austin, even though in 1994, this was a terrible place to start a company. I didn't realize how hard it was going to be compared to other places, because you're right.
It was horrible. We did it all.
Access to capital in the Bay Area is like crazy, about how you can meet a guy in a bar and then get your startup funded.
There you go.
In the Bay Area. Whereas here you have to struggle a little bit. But I think the struggle ends up making, like, especially if we look at the companies that came out of Austin in those early years, like in the 90s, you see that there's all this innovation. Like the product that we built, my first company built, that bank ended up using, was totally, 30 years later, not innovative. But at the time, it was like top of the world innovative. That's why that bank took a risk on, me as a 24-year-old.
Yeah.
And so part of what I think is possible, and we're seeing this in Mexico, and I can tell you, I saw it in Lithuania, I've seen it in Hungary, I saw it in the Czech Republic, I've seen it in Japan, I've seen it in Chile. I lived in Chile in 2003 as well. Like, I can tell you you can see it in a lot of different places. The main thing is, the thing that sets aside these different entrepreneurial ecosystems is, do they recognize that they have something special? And then, yes, you do have situations where some, top of the line oncology doctor based out of Buenos Aires gets connected to capital initially in Chile, that's now getting connected to capital through us here in Texas, for a way of taking on breast cancer that's never been seen in the world before. But the truth is that, that's how it happens. That's how it happens, right? It's like new ways of doing things start in small places. Right now, the Bay Area, Silicon Valley, is a terrible place to do something terribly innovative, like at the early stages, because the costs are too high, right? The costs are way too high, and you're not going to see that crazy innovation happen there, because you can't take a risk like that. Whereas, just like I took a risk in Austin, Texas, before costs were high, I could sit and work on my software at a level that you just you couldn't do even in the Bay Area at the time. I don't know. That ties a bunch of different themes together from my point of view, that maybe kind of, guides how I think about Mexico. You'll see interesting work happening in obviously the main three cities.
Mm-hmm.
And then you also get to crazy technologies that are coming out of some of the smaller cities, like Chihuahua City, like Juarez, like medical devices from Juarez. You'll see interesting manufacturing technologies coming out of San Luis Potosí or Aguascalientes, or or in other parts of Latin America.
It's clustered in China, it clusters in Mexico, it clusters in England. So you have all of these clusters. We built, by the way, your university built a building, IC Square, in Mexico, and you might want to take a look at that. I sent it to Andreas, and Andreas might.
I've been there. It's real close to the Monterey Airport.
Yeah, we built that.
Yeah, no, it's really close to the Monterey Airport. I've been there a number of times. I
want you to know that
I'm away from home.
Bob Peterson, myself, and the vice president for research, we made that happen, and I've been there a number of times. Okay, I'm gonna yield the floor to my colleague.
Yeah, Llewellyn.
Hey, top priorities at the moment. What are you working on?
Top priority right now is, I think this is the moment that Texas and Mexico are like this, right? They border each other.
Mhm.
80% of the trade that's coming from Mexico into the United States comes through that border. And Mexico is not going to go away despite anything that, despite walls or trade barriers or tariffs and stuff like that that come out of DC. The truth is that we're going to see guys like me who grew up in San Antonio and kind of see Mexico as an extension of my own culture. We're I'm betting on that in a big way. And because of the announcement of the 104% tariff or whatever the crazy numbers are, Andres might have new data that something got shut down, but the China U.S. Tariffs just are so astounding that I think the thing we're going to see in a very short order is a deeper integration between United States and Mexico. Now, as a Texan, I know this, as multi-generational Texan, especially with family that goes back before, 200 years before, 200 years before Christ. So like way before even the Spanish got here. But I see this alignment long term. And I think that the thing that's happening is right now, what we're looking at more than ever before is just taking the venture bridges that we're already tying between Texas and Mexico and increasing them. And right now, we even have like Lithuanian and Polish companies and Finnish companies that are talking to us about landing maybe their headquarters in Austin, but they're manufacturing in northern Mexico. And so I think that that's one of the things that we're lining up. Over the last few days, the sting of the tariffs has been like hitting us, but the truth is that I think when all this washes out, Texas and Mexico are going to be even closer together. We're going to see more bilateral activities happening than ever before, and we're lining up around that to prepare for the long term.
That's very interesting. I look at countries.
Come closer. Come closer.
Countries, I'm always curious about why we have underperformers. I mean, probably the world's major underperformer is India, where you have enormous population, you have tremendous talent, and yet compared to China, it has been a huge underperformer, although it hasn't had the political stresses that China has had. And I think of Mexico as possibly being an underperformer. And why has that been? And is this at an end?
I think that when you have democracies like you do in Mexico and you do in India, things are messier, right? The Chinese have this hierarchical kind of control that they can enforce. Like they can organize in the one party system and be hierarchical and say, like, even if you look at a certain value chain of manufacturing, you can see that it's being well articulated by the Chinese. And I admire the thought that they put together, whether it's the value chain around electric vehicles from, lithium integrated all the way to batteries to the motors to, the in vehicles. In the West, we're messier. Actually, I should include India in this as well, although I do not have any expertise in India. I see a democracy.
Just mentioned it as an example, that the democracies have done very well in some circumstance. In Germany, a democracy has led the world economically for a long time, fallen on hard times recently, and in the 90s, when we thought we were going to be eaten up by Japan, long before we worried about China, Japan is a democracy. So it's not just democracies. And of course, authoritarian government can make huge mistakes and go the wrong way. So I'm just curious, when we talk about new technologies, new businesses, we tend to be very heavily concentrated on technology, but there are other new businesses. What does Mexico offer? What are the real strengths of Mexico? Agriculture, tourism, technology, and give me some more.
I mean, the ones that
Energy.
Energy, mining. There's a lot. I mean, the ones that
Manufacturing.
yeah, manufacturing. We've been involved in aerospace, medical device, aerospace, and automotive manufacturing, in some of the systems around that. I do not have a lot of experience in the, in entertainment and tourism and things like that, but some of the other ones I can give you specific examples of.
That's
Mexico is
very
a very creative
interesting.
place. Yeah, no,
That's
Mexico
very-
is a very creative place too, though. It's one of the, and you'll see that across the Americas. In my case, first person experience in Mexico and in Chile, but yeah, it's interesting.
Here are the top places Mexico makes a living off. So
Exactly.
aerospace, textiles, automotive industry, manufacturing, consumer products, electronics, agriculture, energy, oil, services, trade, medical device, food industry, and telecommunications, I would say, should be a big sector in Mexico. Banking, for South America, Latin America.
Very
Yeah.
interesting. I've always thought that you can see the creativity of the Mexicans by walking down the street in almost anywhere. You can see it in the architecture, and you can see it in their long and hugely distinguished artistic career. Some great artists have come out of Mexico, particularly fine art. I just wonder what happens next. The assumption that we're all making here today is that this tariff insanity will go away because Mexico remains on the southern border of the US and Canada remains on the northern border, and the logic of trading freely between these countries would seem ultimately to be overwhelming. What can happen to give Mexico a shot in the arm, to boost it up? What does Mexico need besides stability in America, particularly today? What is it deficient in today?
The number one thing that I would actually say, though, since there's activities that our friends in Mexico could actually take on, I think, though, the thing that I want to say, I hate to be critical, but to be a good American, you kind of have to be willing to criticize to create, as they say. I'd really like to see, instead of us blocking trade and saying that it's going to somehow deal with the drug trade, we need to get Americans healthy and get them off these addictions. And also, we need to deal with the firearms that are being produced in this country and stop the flow of the firearms from this country into that country. You want to increase the security situation. Those two things will change it faster than anything else. And that's something we can address here in the United States and be a better neighbor. So not that I'm trying to be political, but from the truth is that those two things are pretty profound about what they do. The other thing I'd like to see stop, because I think it's short-sighted. It's short-sighted is there's a lot of negative shade that's getting thrown at Latinos in this country, both as well as Mexicans. Or including Mexicans. I was in Mexico when the sitting president in the previous, before he was in the administration, made I think we can't talk about our neighbors in that way that has happened and actually think that that's going to solve anything. It actually just creates, business moves at the speed of trust, and you can't trust people that are like,
Say derogatory things.
Yeah, like calling someone calling a people a rapist and stuff like that. I disagree. And the worst part about it is, for us business guys, that type of dialogue, that type of rhetoric doesn't improve business. If we want to improve business and we're serious about it, only if we're serious about it. Let's deal with the drug addiction problem here in the States, and let's deal with the weapons that are like out of control going across. And then I promise you, and then let's face up to the fact that, Mexico is not a safe place. But then again, here in Austin, Texas, I was assaulted by 4 guys in downtown Austin. So I'm like, come on, let's wake the blank up. Sorry, I won't use colorful language.
Let's put it in an academic thing. Even if we look at America in the last 50 years, 90% of the companies have been founded in just three places: New England, Silicon Valley, Austin, Texas. That's it. Of all the great technology companies, they've been founded just Silicon Valley, Austin, Texas, and Boston. New York is catching up. So there's something more. It's how these things cluster, and it all comes out of putting science first, right? So right now, for example, I'm working with people asking, why is that I'm a Southerner? Nothing has come out of the South. Only thing, we've done 4 companies in the last, since 1865, right? We've done we did Delta Airlines, right? Right. And it just out there. So you got to ask a question about what's the relationship between science and technology in all countries, and then they tend to cluster. But the thing about Mexico is that now, Llewellyn, are you through? Are you finished your questioning?
Oh, go ahead.
The thing about Mexico, and this is what the economist said. He said that, well, we catalog everything in America, whereas there are less waters in Latin America and in Mexico. In America, I can't go squat around New York City with my enterprise. As Hernando de Soto said, it is how the West cataloged the enterprises to create wealth. So when we all travel, whether it's Mexico City or whether it's India, there are companies everywhere, right? I mean, there are people hustling everywhere, right? But he said there's no cataloging of these companies, so therefore there's no wealth creation. Now that's on the overall kind of deal. Now, I would say that the similarities between what we did in Austin and what you're doing, there are no differences. See what I'm saying? I mean, all that comes from the ecosystem, and all come from technology transfer and science to technology. So I've always said the country that owns the science will own the entrepreneurship. The country that owns the science will own the entrepreneurship, especially the new science, biology, chemistry. Because I can tell you this, Kevin, biology will make the computer revolution look like a penny in the near future.
Well, I guess the thing I would say is I agree that science is really, really, really important.
Yeah.
In my own contribution to entrepreneurship, which I need to get published, but I should go ahead and get published, by the way, because I haven't published this yet. On the back of my card is a picture of the wagon train. The whole reason that on our business cards we have the wagon train is it's a reflection about culture and about what made the United States so strong.
Yeah.
What made the West was so strong, but especially the United States. This group of people and a lot of the situations that would, your family, my family, all of our different families, we'd buy a wagon, but we wouldn't necessarily know each other when we meet at a trailhead before we headed west to take risk together. Here, I'm risking my family, you're risking your family, each one of us is risking. And we're about to go west for creating a better world. But we didn't know each other. Existential risk, we didn't know each other. It's the culture about what brought us together in the hopes for the future. The thing that I reflect on, why is it I left the top of the top of the top of Silicon Valley in '94 to come back here? Many times I'm like, wow, maybe I should have spent some more time in Silicon Valley. But then I recognize the thing that made Austin special, and I think this is part of my contribution to Austin, is creating culture that then made it easier to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And this is the thing that that doesn't cost as much, but it's much harder to do than building a lab or something like that. Now, only the words that I would say is, I channeled Drucker, since we've channeled different authors during our time together, is Peter Drucker says that culture eats strategy for lunch.
Yep.
The main thing about it is, I think, why is it that Austin's kicking Dallas's butt in this? Dallas actually has 3 times more entrepreneurs than Austin, but Austin is better organized because we have a culture that, we say, keep Austin weird. And then part of what I did is, in my role is being an entrepreneurial ecosystem facilitator here, being one of the guys who led Bootstrap Austin, and just, you know, I would almost say that I'm like a labor organizer, that, but instead of organizing labor, because that's not my thing, was to organize entrepreneurs. The thing that I think, yeah, the thing that I think is really unique about Austin is that we had better organization around our culture of, you know, I'm going to take care of you, you're going to take care of me, than even between here and Dallas, right? And it's really weird because you look at the money available in Dallas compared to the money available, like historically, especially, you know, it wasn't the money. And in this case, I don't even think it's the science as much as it was the willingness to help each other, which is one of the things that we've done together, right? That
Yeah, I
Mhm.
agree. And it all came from George Cosmesca's head. Let's not forget that. It came from one man, George,
yeah, no, yeah,
just one person, because we
well,
had nothing. And what we like to say is that culture never dies. People might die, but culture doesn't die.
yeah.
As we said at LSU, you would graduate, but culture never graduates, right?
I'd like to butt in here because there's several ideas that keep going around, like your view, Kevin. One, I think that Johnny has somewhat said that location is important to business at a time when it's generally believed for the first time ever you can operate a business essentially from anywhere, and that location is actually not as important as it has been heretofore. Culture certainly is important to business, a business culture. I remember not working, but being in Ireland, being involved with an Irish think tank. When Ireland was a failing country, they believed it was a failure, where people had no confidence. And then with the computer revolution, suddenly they became extraordinarily confident, and those old expectations that nothing could be developed in Ireland went away. So culture is very important, and culture is success. But I wonder about Mexico after the jolt from the Trump administration. To what extent can it look for other markets? To what extent will it be friendlier to China, India, Germany, etc.? Will it never again have the same comfort in being dependent on America?
You know, I think, I mean, well, one of the things that's happening with President Sheinbaum is they signed a free trade agreement, Mexico did, with the EU, on January 28th. You know, the Trump tariffs, it was pretty clear that there was going to be lots of tariffs. They got that free trade agreement moving pretty quick. And we already see the impact of that, in that a lot of European businesses are looking to land in Mexico. And then same thing about I know of a couple of examples of Singaporean businesses that are now, you know, they've scrapped some of their U.S. plans because of the instability perceived in the government, whereas the stability of the Sheinbaum government, like, and even some of the states, like I will, the state of Chihuahua is one of our customers. TechRanch's customers is the state of Chihuahua, and so part of what and now that state is on the other end of the political spectrum from President Sheinbaum, a very business-focused state that right now has negotiated, zero tariffs with regards to what's happening, and so that you'll see the most productive Ford plant in the world, as an example, in there in the state of Chihuahua. You see the Dell plant where they're putting the NVIDIA chips into Dell computer servers there in the state of Chihuahua. You'll see, Johnson and Johnson and its medical device manufacturing happening there. Part of what I think you're seeing in this is Mexico is taking advantage, and President Sheinbaum is taking advantage, and the state of Chihuahua are taking advantage of the flack of what's happening in DC. There will be a dip. I believe there is going to be a dip. It's going to be painful for both sides of the border. But I think coming out of it, I mean, especially given the youth and the engineering talent that's happening in Mexico, long term, it's a really impressive place. And there is, it isn't without fault. Like to Andres's point earlier, it isn't without fault. It's just there's like pretty amazing things that are happening, and I think if nothing else, it's really clear that the EU-Mexico's relationship has gotten significantly stronger at the stumbling of America, or the the U.S. system.
That's very interesting. A final question. How is the educational system in Mexico? I'm not talking about higher education. If you don't teach the kids to read and write and add, it doesn't matter how good your higher education is. If the majority of the population can't read, write, and add, you have a huge problem, and that problem will hold back the entire country. How good is the educational system? It's not
This is
safe in the US or in Britain.
This is a place where I'm not going to say that I have expertise at all. I can tell you that a junior engineer, or the engineering talent that I've come in contact with, software wise, since that's my area of expertise, is just as impressive as their US counterpart. I think your question's a broad base, though. There are different states in Mexico. Out of the 31 states and the District Federal of the of Mexico, so 32 locations. Not every state is similar. Like the state of Chihuahua has quite good education, as an example, and part of it is because they benefit from being on the border, and there's a lot of cross-border knowledge that is just transmitted. Like having El Paso right across the border from Juarez means that there's a lot of education. There's a lot of educators that'll wake up on one side of the border, go to the other side of the border, work with their kids in, like as an example, at a school like the Tec de Monterrey de Juarez, and then go back. So you'll see really interesting things happening. Now, that being said, there are other parts of Mexico that truly are, still stuck below parts of the poverty line. But I think that that's changing rapidly.
Yeah, I would say that in general, Mexico will never, be able to dislodge itself from the US, or the US will be able to dislodge Mexico from itself. I think they're, border countries that will always be together. They'll grow together. I think that Mexico will become an even bigger partner of the US, and I think that Mexico has 120 million people. They'll probably double in size in the next 20 years. And I think that a lot of the workforce, professional workforce, software, engineering, and all that the U.S. needs will come from there in a bigger number. So I think Mexico is going to be in great shape.
Yeah, a lot of the even the semiconductor, since there's been such massive investment in semiconductor activity, semicon activity here in the United States, a lot of the talent that's filling some of those design jobs were trained in Mexico. You see both University of Texas, Texas A&M, and Arizona State University, especially Arizona State University. I don't see how they have massive programs going into Mexico, and it's just crazy to see. I never would have seen, I didn't see that coming. I was, bullish on Mexico, but I didn't see that coming like has now happened.
Well, for us, look, the border issue was not an issue, as we know, for a long time. It's still not an issue. I mean, there are families. I mean, I go down to Brownsville, people go back and forth and they talk to each other. And the truth is that Mexicans consider Texas a natural extension of their culture, right? And I guess it was just, and it was almost a collaboration that always went on. If you look at the billions of dollars of the Mexicans who work in America, and then they're sending their money back to Mexico, I mean, it's literally billions of dollars. But what's important is the movement of talent. When we study entrepreneurs, and this is why the best and brightest leave their countries. So if you look at the data on entrepreneurship, look at Silicon Valley. Those were immigrants. Look at Austin, Texas. They were newcomers, right? Because when you look at the data and you ask who started the companies in America, because when I came out of college, there was no emphasis on entrepreneurship. You went to college and you worked for a big firm, but all of those big firms gone. I mean, I cannot finish high school and go to Boston and work in a shoe factory anymore. You just can't do it, right? So consequently, we had to teach people the importance of entrepreneurship again. In the old days, we called those great entrepreneurs robber barons. We didn't call them entrepreneurs. You know, we beat up on the Rockefellers, we beat up on the Fords. And one thing that Harvard University did was to go back and write the case studies, right, for our MBA programs on what entrepreneurship meant back in the 1700s and 1800s and the 1900s, because we had completely lost that. I can tell you, going through college, nobody talked about starting a company, right? So what you're doing, Kevin, is the idea that we have to continually recreate the entrepreneur spirit and provide the ecosystem for them to do well. And the
Yeah,
good,
wait, I think you're
and you
telling
just
the
need smart people. And smart people come from everywhere.
yeah.
I mean, the
Wait,
group that has the most, well, the highest income in America are Indians,
huh.
followed by Nigerians. Right? It's not Americans,
Oh
right?
yeah, oh yeah,
Because
oh
of their
yeah.
emphasis on innovation and entrepreneurship. So you have to be careful, and you have to look at the data. And when you do the entrepreneurship stuff, newcomers have always been very entrepreneur. And if you look at, I have a book called An American Story, uh, a wealth creation among Mexican Americans. Take a look at it.
Huh. Oh,
Simple book,
definitely
An
be
American
interested.
Story. Yeah, wealth
Hey,
creation among Mexican
it,
Americans.
you know, it's an interesting, let me respond to that, John, in that one of the things that's interesting is when I was in my engineering, you know, I went to engineering school at UT, University of Texas at Austin here. My scholarship advisor would not allow me to take business classes, even though I had already placed out of, I could have graduated in less than like 3 years for, you know, for engineering, which is unheard of. I just placed out of all this stuff. And I was like, well, I'm going to take some business classes and some marketing classes. He actually blocked me being able to take some of those classes. There was a negative bias at UT just that many years ago. I graduated in 90. Against entrepreneurship. It was really kind of crazy. So you're right. It's, you know, John, you're right
Oh,
that
and it still is, by the way.
well, it's great to see that there's more there than there was the time, right? To do
Oh yeah,
these,
I put it in, as a matter of fact. I
yeah,
found
due to
the
your
Herb
work
Kelleher
and
Center.
yeah, and Cosmetics work and, you know,
Yeah,
things
we
like
did
that.
all that, right.
It's
Bill
you know,
Cunningham. Yeah, we did all
yeah.
that. Yeah.
So it is really interesting to see, and that's you're right about the thing that we need to do. You know, back to the cultural thing is we do need to, like you're saying, we do need to keep on presencing that and celebrating that. You know, not, you know, the entrepreneurs that are actually, and in my case, I like to celebrate the pioneers and the revolutionaries is the ones I care about. The
Yeah.
ones that are actually setting out to drive real impact in, you know, positive ways, whether it might be energy or healthcare or something like something that really builds a society. I kind of have a little bit of a negative bias against the businesses that are pure just entertainment and financial plays, just because we need to have more base building of our society to fix the ills of the society.
Yeah, well,
Uh,
what Western civilization, what Anglo-Western civilization gave the world was reason and testing. Okay. And when I say gave the world, I mean gave the world. That is, created, starting to measure stuff. Does it work? What's the relationship between flight? You know, what is engineering? What did the ancient Egyptians do? And from that gift to the whole world, and I think that's the gift of Western society, Anglo-Western society, came the whole idea that hey, you can create all kind of products. And I
Mm-hmm.
think entrepreneurship has always been there since in the ancient world, right? But not tested like it was in the Western world, you know, since the ancient Greeks. Yeah.
Llewellyn, final thoughts.
Well, I think it's very interesting, and I salute you, Kevin, to the interest in the work you're doing, which is fascinating. I have always felt that Mexico was underrated and that it had a huge amount to offer, and that there is a peculiar disinclination in the U.S. to look either north or south. I've said this many times. First time Americans get a little bit of money, they go to Europe. They never go to Canada. They may go to Cancun or a little vacation like that. but the culture of Mexico is really very important to America. It is part of our culture now. And it seems to me that, and I think you echoed this, the three countries, Canada, the US, and Mexico, are inextricably bound together by population as well as by geographic location. And we should recognize that. And it was just appalling to see this harebrained administration not understand that.
I want
found
to
this a very constructive, interesting discussion, and I'm so glad you were our guest today.
Yeah, I
Thank
want to point out before we sign off that Mexico just put into operation the Mayan train project, which basically replaces the Panama Canal, and they're moving goods from the Pacific Ocean to the Atlantic Ocean at the speed of light. And the thing is, it's going to be a gigantic boom for the economy in Mexico, geographically, real estate, trade, all kinds of things. So watch out for that project, and it's the magnitude of how it transforms Mexico as the next gateway to trading east-west. John, final thoughts.
Well, I think it's very interesting. And, I've always believed in ecosystems. And I think what makes the world go around are ecosystem, whether you're a musician, whether you're a plumber, whatever you do, you need people to encourage you and a culture around you to be successful. This is why some regions are known for great farming. Some regions are known for other things. And for the entrepreneurship regions, I think it is very, very important to set up the ecosystem, because what happened is they might get their funding in New York, but they'll move to Austin to start a business. They might get their funding in Milwaukee, but they'll move to Austin or Silicon Valley to start the business. Even now, Andreas, when we have to raise, if you look at Angelo's shop, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have to raise 500 million. We got to go to Silicon Valley. We don't do it in Austin. And so I think Kevin is doing a great thing. As a matter of fact, Kevin, I'm gonna put you to work here. It's been so good. When I have people coming in town, I'm gonna have your place host them so you can talk about the great stuff you've done.
Yeah, I would love to. I'd love to. We're here in the Hilton, right next to the Austin Convention Center, which you can see through the now obviously the convention center is about to go and be deconstructed to build even bigger, but TechRange should be happy to host them. And John, I don't know you remember this, but you invited me over to your home in April 2003. What it's now been 20
I remember.
Yeah, 22 almost 22 years ago or something like that.
Yeah.
That conversation, which launched me right before I went to Chile to take this work, the first version of this work all those years ago. Yeah, I think that just like you did with me, or I think like you'd say Kosmetsky did for you and you did for me, part of the idea is to keep on replicating that. I think there's something really special about the Austin model of entrepreneurship. And, it has a way of being a possible solution for the craziness we see in the world about how we take care of each other, how we build together and things like that. And I'm excited to have gotten to share some time with you guys. All three of you guys, but especially John, thank you for you were part of my journey back at that right before I launched into Chile. So thank you for that.
Okay, no problem.
Thank you, guys. Johnny, take us away.
There's my path, there's my friend. All good things must have an end. Sad things and nothing and on and on. I guess they went to Mexico. They all went to Mexico. One is dead, got to go. Tengo go, presente, want to cut aside. They all went to Mexico. Well, now, where's my mule? Where's my brave? All has packed, gone away. Mules don't go north and they go slow. I guess they went to Mexico.
Woo!
Sounds great. Thank you, guys.
All right.
Take care, Kevin. We'll follow up with you, Kevin. We'll stay in touch.
That sounds great. Please do. And if you shoot me the link to the recording too, my team would love to
Oh yeah,
yeah, you get a
we'll
link.
that's
You get all
coming.
of
That's
that.
coming.
All right, cool.
All righty.
Thank you all.
All
Take
right,
care.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.